Welcome to Hurley Writes Improving Feedback on Your Team's Writing. We'll just give it another minute to let people come in. Good morning. Hopefully it's morning where you are. It's morning when I am. Hopefully you had a good sleep, that you're caffeinated, that you're ready to go. Okay, I think we should get started. Let me share my PowerPoint with you. All right, you should be seeing me. You should be seeing my PowerPoint. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Hurley Writes webinar, Improving Feedback on Your Team's Writing. My name is Elizabeth Preston, and I'm an executive consultant at Hurley Writes, and I'm also Hurley Writes podcast producer and co-host. We also have Hurley Writes social media manager with us in the chat, Angie Pennington. So if you see her around, give her a hello. She might be responding to you in your comments. I do have a question and answer option today, and that will be at the end. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I'll make sure to see them at the end. Now today, we are going to be talking about how to improve feedback on your team's writing. I'll go over the frequent concerns that we hear regarding teams reviewing processes, the true issues that are typically at the root of the problems, and how you can transform your feedback so that it's effective, efficient, and does what you want it to do. I'll also discuss the importance and value of doing a communication audit. But first, let's discuss what we often hear from reviewers. Oftentimes, reviewers come to us and they say, you know what? My team's grammar sucks. They're wordy in their document. There's a lack of clarity, and there's just too many details. But oftentimes, what we hear are actually symptoms of a deeper problem. And one of those deeper problems or deeper issues that are actually the cause of these is that there aren't any standards for review. Now, by standards, I mean specific and overt expectations for documents. You have to document your standards for your team. Otherwise, you're kind of expecting them to be psychics, which I don't know about you. I'm not. I don't know what people are thinking. And I don't think your team knows what you're thinking either, unless you overtly tell them. You need to have these standards written down so that your team can access them and use them during their writing process. Oftentimes, I'll ask clients what standards they have in place for their review process, and they go, well, we want good and clear writing, and our team knows that. Do they? Also, good and clear writing aren't standards. They're expectations. Let me explain. An expectation is a strong belief that something's going to happen in the future, that someone will accomplish something. I have an expectation that my team will write good and clear documents. But a standard is a level of quality, something that's accepted as a norm and is generally used as a basis for judgment. I have a standard that my writers adjust the technical language in their documents to meet their target audience's knowledge level. And that standard can help me to get my writers to achieve my expectation of good documents. I can have a standard that my writers have their writing organized in a logical manner, not all over the place. They have headings and subheadings that make sense for their target audience. And this standard helps my writers to achieve clear writing. You can have the expectation, but your writers need clear and overt standards for them to reference during the writing process in order to meet your expectations. Also, these standards have to be written down and accessible to your writers. Otherwise, you're expecting them to be psychic. Oftentimes, organizations just feel like these are understood. that, well, they know this. Your writers can't know anything unless you've overtly told them. For example, it's kind of like if you're saying, well, I want my document to be informative. Informative means different things to different folks. Informative could be, I want to give my reader everything and anything, including the kitchen sink. Or informative could mean just including the technical details that the reader needs in order to understand the document and do what they need to do. I don't know which version of informative you mean, and neither do your writers, unless you tell me. Without clear and overt and codified standards, you can confuse your writers, you can encourage your writers to just kind of guess and hope that they make you happy, and you can encourage miscommunication among your team. Another possible root problem is having no clear goal. Does your team actually know what the goal of the review is? The typical assumption is that you're reviewing for clarity. I bet you've heard that a lot. But there are different types of reviews. There is the review for technically correct information. Is the information accurate? Are there any errors in the data itself? This is often what technical editors look for to see if the information is accurate and correct. But there's another type of review, and that's reviewing for readability. Readability is how well the document flows, the brevity, the logic, the accessibility, and the clarity. You can be an outsider to a project or a company, and you can still review for readability. Technical editors, though, typically don't review for readability. Now, content and readability are both key to a document's success, but oftentimes reviewers and writers will only focus on the content. Why is this problematic? Because if that document's going outside of the company, in particular, to vendors, to clients, if you have proposals, they might not know what you're talking about, and then you'll never get to what you want to get to. Today, I'm mostly talking to you about reviewing for readability, but a lot of the same ideas that I talk about readability will apply to content issues as well. Your team and you need to agree on the purpose of the review beyond clarity. Move forward, go past clarity. Ask, do you guys want to emphasize certain information? Are your writers writing for a particular reader that has particular needs? How deeply are you going to go into the document? When you align on the goal of the review, your goal will also dictate how much time you spend on that document in the review process and how many rounds of review you will go through. You know, another possible root problem is a lack of process. If you take anything from today, please don't have a lack of process. We found that when clients don't have a process with clear steps, or they have kind of a hazy process, then they spend way too much time on review, both with the writers and reviewers ending up frustrated. You need a review process in place that clearly expresses your expectations to both your reviewers and your writers. And you need to put steps in place so that the document can meet your desired standards. This will help both parties, writers and reviewers, know what comes next. It's kind of like if you're traveling to someplace and you want to travel with your best friend. And let's say you're traveling to Reno, Nevada, because that's my hometown, so why wouldn't I use it? And you go, you know what, bestie? Let's go to Reno. But your bestie goes, all right, cool. How are we going to get there? Where are we going to meet up? What are we going to do? And you go, I don't know. Let's just hope for the best. That often doesn't bode well for traveling, and it doesn't bode well for writing processes and for review processes. If you don't have a clear review process in place with identifiable steps, then you're leaving things up to chance and you're hoping for the best, which we know doesn't really work out well in writing or traveling. Don't do that if you're traveling, and it's certainly not efficient. Your process may have multiple stages along the way in your review process. You may target different aspects of the document with different reviews. You may have more than one review instead of waiting until the very last minute up next to that deadline. I don't know. But I encourage you to think about the steps you would want in your review process and what your ideal process would look like. What would be the timeline? Another possible root issue is that there's no agreement on what to review for. We talked earlier about standards, and I want to go back to that real quick. Because when we don't have clear standards, it's hard to get everyone to agree what to review for. And without those agreements on standards, we can lose meaning and value behind the feedback. Without agreement, without meaning, without value, the feedback can come off as feeling like personal preferences to writers. And the feedback becomes, oh, this is just what Sally wants. Joe just has a pet peeve about this, so that's what I have to do to appease them. And then the writer starts writing for individual people rather than for the document's purpose. That doesn't promote short-term improvement. It doesn't promote long-term improvement for your writers or for the documents. The bottom line is that writers and reviewers need to be clear on what their documents are actually being reviewed for. Having that agreement on what to review actually saves time, which also saves money, which we all want to do, right? And it also assures alignment amongst your team members. I also encourage you to reflect on how your team delivers on your current writing standards. Does everyone agree upon those standards? Are they using different standards? Now, I will tell you, there is such a thing as poor quality feedback. There's such thing as bad feedback. Maybe you've received bad feedback in the past. I know I have. Bad feedback can cause miscommunications. It can cause misunderstandings, and it can cause frustrations among your team. Some examples of poor quality feedback are, make this crisper, reword, unclear, awkward. You know what your writers do when they hear unclear and awkward? They go, cool story, bro. What do you want me to do with that? That may surprise some of you, that awkward and unclear is poor feedback, but it is, because they don't give the writer a clear path forward in their revisions. After all, if they thought something was clear or awkward in the first place, they wouldn't have written it that way, unless they really don't like you, which hopefully isn't the case. Those comments also put the writer in a corner where they feel like they just have to throw stuff at you to hope that you will get off their backs. We're not focusing on the outcome that we want with the document. We're focusing on appeasing people. That doesn't make for good review processes. It doesn't make for good writing. A better way to provide feedback is to ask the writer questions about the document. Why did you do the sentence this way? Why did you organize this section that way? Are you trying to say, and then you rephrase what you think the writer's trying to say? I love that one in particular because it's a reflection moment where the writer goes, did I mean to say that? I don't think so. And then they have to use their critical thinking skills and the problem-solving skills. You actually make them think. That's the point of these questions, to engage the writer's critical thinking skills and problem-solving skills. You hire smart people. Why would you not want to use their smarts? When you push writers to engage their critical thinking skills and their problem-solving skills, you help them to internalize the lessons from each writing document. You also help them to understand the reviewer's logic behind their comments. It's no longer just a pet peeve. It's no longer just, oh, well, that's Joe's preference. There's a reason. It's meaningful. It's valuable. They'll listen to it. They'll do it. Ultimately, it also saves you time and money. Another issue that we run into a lot that creates poor feedback is that reviewers try to fix the writer's work. Stop it. It doesn't help. I promise. Stop trying to fix your writer's work. This is such a common problem that we see, and it's so detrimental. Let me tell you why. A lot of times people go in and go, oh, well, I'll just fix everything. It'll be fine. My writer will see what I want. It'll be giving them an example, and they'll do that in the future. I promise you that's not how it works. That's not how research shows that it works. It's also not how I've seen it work at all. I've been doing this for a while. I know I don't look that old, but I am. Here's a specific example. I had a client, one of my favorite clients. He's such a nice man. And he would provide a lot of feedback on his writer's work. I didn't say good feedback, notice that. He would often go in and fix the writer's work. And this man spent hours on review. And he's like, this is not my job, but I have to do this to help my writers. So he would go in, he'd reorganize, he'd fix the sentences, a comma there, and he'd be like, all right, they'll get this. Well, I talked to one of his team members, one of the team members that was struggling the most. And I said, okay, you've seen his feedback on your work. What patterns are you noticing? This team member goes, I don't know. I just hit accept all on the track changes. You hit accept all and you don't read it? And he's like, yeah, why would I even try? Because he's going to do what he wants anyway. So why waste my time? Oh, I felt so bad for this client. He's such a sweet man, and he's spending all this time honestly believing he had good intentions that this was going to help his team member. That wasn't what was happening, though. This story demonstrates that fixing the writer's work does not save time. Let me say that again. Fixing the writer's work does not save time. Rather, it teaches the writers that they don't have to improve on their writing. The reviewer will do it for them. It trains writers to be dependent upon someone else instead of working independently and putting forward their best work. It trains writers not to critically think about their work, so they're just kind of spitting out trash. And it diminishes the writer's feelings of ownership, thereby decreasing their morale. But by using effective commenting strategies, you can encourage long-time learning. You can save time, and you can get better documents by helping the writer to increase how invested they are in the document. Research shows over and over again, and maybe you've experienced this too, that people care on projects when they feel like they own part of it. And when they care, they do better work. They put in more effort. That's what we want. We want them to care. We want them to put in more effort. So we do that in part by, I know this is weird, but it's true, by not fixing their work. Let me show you some examples of ineffective feedback versus effective feedback. So we have this excerpt, and it's about the environmental dangers that electric cars pose because they have batteries that can put out toxic metals into the environment. Now, look, the reviewer's gone in and fixed those sentences. Ooh, don't fix those sentences. No, stop. The reviewers also changed some of these sentences, not because they're necessarily grammatically incorrect, but because that's just not how they would have done it. It's a personal preference thing. There's not a whole lot of value or meaning behind those for the writer. These fixes don't come off as helpful. Rather, they come off as the reviewer just changing things to fit their writing preferences and speak to their pet peeves. These fixes don't have meaning for the writer. So the writer's not going to internalize any meaningful lessons from this document and take it to the next document. We want them to continually learn, to continually get better, to grow and evolve as writers. This doesn't do that. These fixes are also likely to produce much more frustration than feelings of support for the writer. So the result is like what my poor client found. The writer hits accept all the track changes, doesn't really read them, moves on. Also, it's likely that the reviewer is going to see these sort of same things happen in the writer's future documents, and they're going to feel like they never listened to me. They just ignored me. Well, yes, but that's also kind of your fault. They're going to feel frustrated. The reviewer will feel frustrated. They'll feel unheard. And then we get some miscommunications and bad feelings among our team members, and we don't want that either. Now, let's look at the comments on the side there. We see comments including awkward, unclear, needs transition, and explain. These are all the cool story bro comments. It's like, I don't know what you want me to do with that. Okay. These comments don't provide the writer with a clear place to go in their revisions, an actionable path forward. That one that says explain? Really? For what purpose? When will the writer know that they've explained enough? When will they know that they've explained too much? When will they know that they've still explained too little? That comment doesn't help. Look at the needs transition one. Why? Why does it need a transition? What's the point? The writer doesn't know what the point is, otherwise they would have done it in the first place. And so they'll kind of stick a transition word in and hope that it makes the reviewer happy. That doesn't lead to any learning. These types of comments don't lead to better writing. They don't lead to better documents. They don't lead to your writer to working independently, and they don't lead to your writers improving their writing skills. But let's see what happens when we do effective feedback techniques. Oh, would you look at that? There's not a bit of red on there. Looks like we haven't fixed anything in our writer's document. Or have we? Let's look at our comments. This first one. Is the goal of the article to discuss proper battery disposal? Just a simple little question. Yet, in that moment, the reviewer has encouraged the writer to think critically about their document. Is this really your goal? If you read on to the document, you'll find out that it's not really that writer's goal at all. So the writer's encouraged to look and go, okay, well, what about my document made the reader think that that was my goal? I've got to fix that. I've got to go in and change things, judge things up a little bit and figure out why did they get that? And how do I get them to actually understand my main goal? Also, this one little question indicates to the writer that they need to set expectations at the beginning of the document. They need to show what the document's going to be about at the beginning. The reviewer could simply tell the writer, set expectations. Or we can make the writer think. We can make them use their problem-solving skills and critical thinking skills to learn and take that lesson of goal setting and bring it to their next documents in the future. Then the writer will have already done it in future documents and the reviewer won't have to comment at all. Wouldn't that be nice? To have to do less comments? Wouldn't it be nice if you could do 20 less minutes reviewing your team members' documents? This is one way how. Also, I'm pointed out to you at the beginning that there's no red on the document, no fixing of the sentences themselves. Why do we do that? Why is there no red? Why is there no fixing of the grammar, even though there are a couple grammatical errors? Because there's no point. Why would I waste time as a reviewer changing my writer's writing, fixing the sentences when it's going to change? When these sentences, they're going to go away, they're going to be different. So what was the point of me spending 5 minutes trying to do a comma here, a comma there, and fix this dependent clause and fix this independent clause? There's no point. That's just wasting time. Let's look at another comment. Let's look at that second one. What's the relationship between battery replacement and the fact that they can produce hazardous waste? This is what that last slide was trying to ask when it said needs transition, but it didn't really ask at all. It didn't say that. Here, the reviewer has asked the writer to create logic between their main claim and what they're writing in this next paragraph so that the reader can follow the line of logic, understand the writer's thought process and where they're going, and ultimately agree that the writer's correct. When the writer comes up against something like this in the future, they're going to go, okay, I have to put logic here. I can't just say this claim. I have to connect my claims and my paragraphs with logic. And they'll do it before it even reaches the reviewer's desk. Why? Why are these questions almost magic? It's not magic, it's actually very research-based. But why do they work? Because the writer has to think. They have to engage with the document, with the question, and therefore they actively learn. Research shows that when we engage with materials and principles, we actively learn. And when we actively learn, we are more likely to remember those materials and principles and apply them to future contexts, even to contexts we haven't encountered before. But we don't get any of those benefits, or we get very few of them, if we don't make the writer think, if we don't make them engage, if we don't make them use their critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Now, I won't make you go through all of these comments with me, but the point here is that by using better feedback strategies, I, as a reviewer, can do less work, waste less time, encourage my writer to think more, encourage my writer to better their writing skills, and set up my writer for future success. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but this one with the questions takes a whole lot less time than fixing the writer's work. All of this sounds like a win-win situation to me. So now we've revealed a lot of the underlying root causes of ineffective feedback. So how do we improve our feedback on our team members' writing? One way to improve your feedback is to make sure that it's governed by SMART goals, because who doesn't love a good acronym? By SMART, I mean S is for specific. Be specific in the examples that you give. Pull examples from the text. Be specific with your explanations. Don't do things like unclear, awkward, this needs to be clearer, this needs to be crisper. That's not specific at all. M is for measurable. It refers to measuring how effective your comments are. Can your comments actually help the writer to improve? Can your writer use your comments to help improve their writing skills and the document? Do your comments contain actionable plans forward? Here's some steps you can take. Or are they falling into that trap of awkward and unclear? A is for achievable. What can actually be done with this document? What's reasonable? What can be done with this section? What can be done with this paragraph? What can be done with this sentence? Is what you're asking of the writer reasonable? Don't ask them to give you the world when the document's due tomorrow. So what's reasonable? R is for relevant. Is the feedback relevant to the document, to the document's desired result, and to how you want the writer to improve? What's relevant to comment on in light of what you want the document to do? I'll give an example. So I am a grammar nerd, believe it or not. Maybe my PhD in English would indicate that. I don't know. Maybe it tells on me. But one of my pet peeves is an erroneous semicolon. Ugh, when I see a semicolon used wrong, it's like it just nails on a chalkboard. It bothers me. But the truth is, a misplaced semicolon is not going to make or break a document. So if I'm going through a team member's writing, I waste time if I comment on the semicolons simply because that's my pet peeve. I use my time much more efficiently and effectively, and I help the writer more if I focus on big picture items, on those bigger fish to fry, than if I'm commenting on their semicolon use. If I really want to comment on their semicolon use, I'll buy them lunch and tell them how to use semicolons correctly. By the way, if you want to know how to use semicolons correctly, ask in the chat, I'll let you know. T is for timely. If the project is due in a week and you give the writer feedback 2 weeks after the deadline, well, you've missed an opportunity. Sure, you could have the writer look at your feedback after the fact and you work backwards and try to learn from it, but wouldn't it have been more helpful if you had given the writer that feedback before the deadline, a week before the deadline? To help with this, consider discussing with your team the document's timeline and building in opportunities to review the feedback throughout the process, not just at the end, but throughout. With these SMART goals in mind, you can start to establish a process of review that will be effective, efficient, and will achieve the goals that you want to achieve. And if we have a process in place, if we have a strategy, then we have a clear route to achieving our goal. Then, if we don't end up meeting that goal or the outcome we want with our reviews, we know we need to change. Sounds very much like the scientific method, doesn't it? We know something in our strategy and our process didn't work. Let's go back. Let's change something. Let's refine something. But if our process did work, okay, now we know that, and we can bring it to future projects, other projects. We can alter it as necessary, or we can keep it the same because it's yielding good results. Reviewing and editing should be a process instead of just trying to throw stuff at a wall and hoping that it sticks. So process, here's some just ideas of what you could put into your process. It could include multiple brainstorming sessions before, during, and maybe even after the process to learn what you could do better. It could include multiple workshop sessions on works in progress. It could be giving feedback during the creative process and using targeted edits. Target edits are where you choose 1 to 2 things to look for, and that's what you focus on instead of everything in the kitchen sink. You could give opportunities for writers to respond to your feedback throughout the process and ask questions for clarification. This is a really good one because it creates a dialogue between the writer and the reviewer. And it promotes clear communication and helps to clear up any possible misunderstandings. Ideally, you would have a combination of written feedback and verbal feedback. And research shows that this combination does really, really well in helping writers. No matter what, you need to build in a step in your review process for some sort of dialogue between the writer and the reviewer. If you can't, then a writing coach is an alternative that can help you fill in this gap. So I encourage you to think about how often you give written and verbal feedback to your team. Now, when you leave here, how do you know exactly what's going on in your review process? How do you know what's working, what's not working? How can you improve your organization's review process and overall writing to make it more efficient and effective? You can reflect and you can hope that you get it right. I've given you tools today to help you do that. You can talk with your writers and see where are they feeling stuck, where are they feeling that the process is efficient and helpful, where are they feeling where it's falling short. You could also just get scientific about it with a communication audit. A communication audit, well, first, let me tell you that writing gets a reputation for being kind of nebulous, where you know good writing when you see it and you know bad writing when you see it. And that's fine. I understand writing kind of earns that reputation, especially if you're thinking about the writing from college. We have a joke on our podcast that every bad writing habit is because of college. If you want to know more, listen to the podcast. But a communication audit helps us actually look at writing scientifically. We can quantify, we can measure, and we can assess writing and how you review writing in a logical and scientific method by using the communication audit. We can objectively see where the issues lie. We can analyze what the problems are and where the problems are occurring and where they're not occurring. And we can develop a plan of action that will address the issues that are actually going on in your organization that may be producing the symptoms you don't like, instead of just slapping on Band-Aid solutions and hoping for the best. We see so many people invest time, money, and effort into Band-Aid solutions, meaning that these are solutions that seem to treat a symptom, but it keeps popping up. This symptom keeps happening. I keep seeing problems with my team's grammar. I keep seeing problems with my team's clarity. That's a symptom. That's not the true issue at hand. If you just treat that symptom, you're wasting time, you're wasting money, you're wasting effort. You've got to treat the root cause. It's kind of like if you go into a doctor and your arm is kind of bent in all weird ways. And you're like, you know what? My arm hurts. I have this pain in my arm. And the doctor goes, okay, here's some Advil. Bye. Hopefully that hasn't happened to you, but I think some of us have had similar experiences. Your arm's still broken. That pain's going to come back. The Advil isn't going to fix everything. A communication audit helps you to see that the arm is broken. So think of the communication audit as an MRI for your writing, for your organization's reviewing process, and for your organization's overall communication to give you a clear picture of what's going on. If you want to know more about communication audits, please feel free to reach out to Hurley Wright on LinkedIn. Our contact information will also be on the handout that should come with this webinar. At this time, I'd like to open it up for questions. So please put your questions in the chat. I'll be going through the chat in a minute. And as you're writing those questions, I want to go over 3 things with you. The first is that you should get a handout from this webinar. It should be in your inbox now if you registered early. If it's not, give it 10 minutes. And if you don't get it, send me an email at elizabeth@hurleywright.com because it's a really neat and helpful handout. I think it's going to help you with your review process to put a process in place. If you take nothing away from today, but this one thing, it's put a process in place. And also stop fixing your writing, your writer's writing. I know I gave you 2, sorry, but those are 2 very important things. So make sure to email me if you don't get that handout. Another thing I want to mention is that our writing docs, our new podcast, season 2, is premiering tomorrow. We call it the writing docs because I have a PhD and my co-host Sarah is working on her doctorate. So writing docs feels apropos. Also, I never get called doctor anymore. No one tells you that. When you get out of academia with your PhD, no one calls you doctor. So it's my one time to get called a doctor. We're not medical doctors. We can't fix your health, but we can fix your grammar. So make sure to check that out. I have a QR code there for you so you can use your phone and it'll pop you right into that. But our season, we had some wonderful guests and I know they're going to help your writing and your writing process to be more effective and efficient. Also, some of them are really funny. So check that out. And our podcast is also free. It'll be on streaming services, streaming platforms, and it'll be on YouTube too. And speaking of free things, I hope that you'll join us for our next free webinar, which is on March 21st at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with my co-host, my podcast co-host and colleague, Sarah. She's going to be talking on leadership and really help you to sharpen your leadership skills as well as your writing skills and help your team with their writing so you can support them and get the best, most effective, and efficient documents possible. So make sure to mark your calendars for her webinar. You can also make sure to pay attention to Hurley Wright's LinkedIn, and we'll be posting all about it, so don't miss it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so I can check out the chat and see what questions we have. All right. Let me refresh this. Okay, I see. All right. So I see on a private message, someone said, how do I even start? Okay, that's fair. That's fair. How do I even start this process? You can start, I would suggest, with the communication audit, where you actually see what the problems are that's happening. That's a great way to start. If you want to start without the communication audit, I'd say talk with your writers. See what's working. See what's not working for them. And then kind of alter your process and get on the same page with your writers. Let's see what else. What would you recommend for those who are afraid to have the standards conversation with your team? Ooh, it sounds like the relationship status with your team. Let's talk about a relationship status. Scary conversation for anyone. The standards conversation should not feel like something intimidating. It should not feel like something that you're going to offend your writers with. You're not telling them that they're doing it or not doing it. What you're telling them is, here, let me lay my brain out on the table so you're not playing a guessing game anymore. No one likes guessing games. Stop with the guessing games. You're just getting on the same page with clear communication. So don't be afraid. Write down your standards, not just the expectations. Use the expectations as like the main idea, and then the standards underneath there. And then just be open and honest. All right. It looks like those are most of the questions. If you have, oh, let me see. Do you talk about feedback in any of your upcoming Writing Docs episodes this season? We do. We did talk about that. A lot of writers are scarred from the feedback we received in college. So we know that we have to make feedback less scary, less intimidating, and less like writers are feeling attacked. So we are talking about feedback in our upcoming Writing Docs episodes. We also talk about it in season 1 if you want to check that out. Let's see, Sarah asks, what are your thoughts on the tone of the feedback? What if I'm afraid of coming across too harsh? That's fair. I think a lot of times we're afraid to hurt people's feelings. But having that standards conversation, first of all, saying, here are the standards that we need to meet. That will help writers to feel like, well, okay, they're not attacking me. They just want to make better documents. Having that verbal feedback portion as well will help you to tell your writers, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm just trying to help. Here's what's coming off. It's sometimes written feedback can be like texting, where you get offended and you're like, what? They meant that? Oh, that emoji, it's so hurtful. That's why you need to talk to, because that is going to clear up miscommunications and it's going to help set the tone as well. I would also say, look at your written feedback and see if you are making judgments on the value rather than judgments on the standards that are put into place. That's why it's so important to have agreed upon standards. All right. Well, I think that's about all my time today, and I want to be respectful of your time. I don't want to go over. If you have any questions, if you have comments, or if you'd like to get in touch with Hurley Write, make sure to email us either at info@hurleywrite.com or elizabeth@hurleywrite.com. Make sure to look for that handout in your webinar. Thanks for joining us today, everybody, and hopefully I'll see you at Sarah's webinar on March 21st. Thank you.